The woman stepped off the stagecoach in Cherry Creek, Colorado territory, with nothing but a carpet bag, a faded dress, and secrets she intended to take to her grave. It was August of 1873, and the summer heat pressed down on the dusty Main Street like an iron skillet fresh from a fire. She stood there for a moment, breathing in the dry mountain air, feeling the weight of 3 weeks of travel settle into her bones. Behind her lay everything she was running from. Ahead, she hoped, lay something resembling freedom. The town was smaller than she had imagined, just a collection of weathered wooden buildings clustered along a rutted dirt road. A general store, a saloon, a livery stable, and a handful of other structures that looked like they had been thrown together in a hurry and forgotten just as quickly. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and imposing against the endless blue sky. She picked up her bag and started walking, not sure where she was going but determined to keep moving. That was when she saw him. He was leaning against a fence post outside the livery, tall and lean with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore dusty work clothes and boots that had seen better days, and he was watching her with an expression that was more curious than intrusive. Their eyes met for just a moment before she looked away, but it was enough. She felt something shift in the air between them, some recognition that had nothing to do with prior acquaintance, and everything to do with the way two lost souls sometimes find each other in unexpected places. She kept walking until she reached the boarding house, a 2-story building with peeling white paint and a hand-lettered sign that read "Rooms Available." The woman who answered her knock was middle-aged and practical-looking, with gray streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. "I need a room," she said, "just for tonight until I can find work." The landlady looked her over with shrewd eyes. "You got money, some. Enough for a few days if I am careful. Name," she hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Call me Clara." It was not her real name, but it would do. The landlady did not seem to notice the pause. She nodded and stepped aside. "I am Mrs. Henderson. Room is 50 cents a night, payment in advance. No men, no drinking, no trouble. That suits me fine." The room was small and spare, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the street. She set down her bag and sat on the edge of the bed, allowing herself one moment of exhaustion before she had to start figuring out what came next. She had $8.30 to her name. That would last maybe 2 weeks if she was frugal and lucky. She needed work, and she needed it fast. The next morning she put on her cleanest dress and went looking. The general store did not need help, neither did the milliner or the laundry. By mid-afternoon she was tired, hungry, and starting to feel the first whispers of panic. That was when she found herself standing in front of the saloon. It was called the Silver Dollar, and even in the daylight she could hear piano music drifting through the swinging doors. She stood there for a long moment, trying to decide if she was desperate enough. They might hire you as a serving girl. She turned to find the cowboy from yesterday standing behind her. Up close, he was even more striking, with gray eyes that seemed to see more than they should and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily. "I was not planning to go in," she said, though they both knew it was a lie. "No shame in honest work," he said. "The owner is decent enough. He would not expect anything from you that you did not want to give." She studied him for a moment. "Why are you telling me this?" he shrugged. "You looked like you could use some information." "I am Aaron Parker. I run cattle just outside of town." "Clara," she said, and left it at that. He waited as if expecting more, but when she offered nothing else, he just touched the brim of his hat. "Well, Miss Clara, welcome to Cherry Creek. If you need anything, you can find me at the ranch about 5 miles north. Anyone can point you the way." Then he walked away, leaving her standing there with a strange warmth spreading through her chest. She did not go into the saloon that day. Instead, she went back to the boarding house and counted her money again, as if the coins might have multiplied while she was not looking. They had not. That evening there was a knock on her door. When she opened it, she found Aaron Parker standing in the hallway, hat in hand. "Mrs. Henderson said you were looking for work," he said without preamble. "My housekeeper quit last month to get married. The ranch house is a mess and I cannot cook worth a damn. If you want the job, it is yours." She stared at him. "You do not know anything about me. I know you are new in town, you need work, and you carry yourself like someone who is used to hard labor. That is enough. What makes you think I can cook, can you? Yes. Then that is settled." He named a wage that was more than fair. "Room and board included. You would have your own space in the house, completely separate from mine. I am gone most days from sunup to sundown anyway." It was too good to be true, which meant there had to be a catch. She had learned that lesson the hard way. "What do you really want from me?" He met her gaze steadily. "Someone to cook my meals and keep the house from falling down around my ears. That is all. I give you my word." His word. As if that meant something. As if promises held any weight in this world. But she was down to $8 and looking at a future that was growing dimmer by the hour. "Sometimes you had to take a risk. When do I start?" "Tomorrow, if you are willing. I will come by at sunrise with the wagon." She nodded slowly. "All right." After he left, she sat by the window and watched the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and deep violet. She had no idea what she was getting herself into, but for the first time in months, she felt something that might have been hope. Aaron arrived exactly at sunrise, driving a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 bay horses. She climbed up beside him with her carpet bag, and they rode out of town in companionable silence. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of sage and pine. The ranch was more substantial than she had expected. The house itself was a solid 2-story structure built from timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. There was a barn, a corral with several horses, and in the distance, she could see cattle grazing on the open range. "It is not much," Aaron said as he helped her down from the wagon, "but it is home." Inside, the house was indeed a mess. Dishes were piled in the sink, dust covered every surface, and there were muddy boot prints tracked across the floor. But the bones of the place were good. She could see that someone had built this house with care, with attention to detail. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the left," Aaron said. "Mine is at the end of the hall. The kitchen is through there and the pantry is fairly well stocked. I will leave you to get settled." He left before she could respond, heading out to the barn with long, easy strides. She stood in the middle of the chaos and rolled up her sleeves. By the time Aaron came in for dinner that evening, the kitchen was spotless. The dishes were washed and put away, and something that smelled like heaven was bubbling on the stove. She had made a simple beef stew with vegetables from the garden she had found behind the house, along with fresh biscuits that were golden and flaky. He stopped in the doorway and just stared. "I told you I could cook," she said. "I am starting to think I am not paying you enough." They ate together at the kitchen table, and if the silence was a bit awkward at first, it gradually grew more comfortable. He did not ask her questions, and she was grateful for that. Instead, he told her about the ranch, about the cattle drive that was coming up in a few weeks, about the challenges of running a spread this size mostly on his own. "You do not have any hired hands?" she asked. "I have 2. They bunk in the smaller house near the barn. Good men, both of them. You will meet them tomorrow." She nodded and took another bite of stew, thinking about how strange it was to be sitting here in this kitchen with this man she barely knew. A week ago, she had been in a completely different world. Now she was here, and it almost felt like she could breathe again. Over the following days, she fell into a routine. She woke before dawn to start breakfast, prepared lunch, cleaned the house, tended the garden, and had dinner ready when Aaron came in from the range. It was hard work, but it was honest work, and she found a certain peace in it. Aaron was easy to work for. He did not hover or make demands. He thanked her for every meal, treated her with respect, and kept his distance. But she was aware of him in a way that was both disconcerting and thrilling. The way he moved, the sound of his voice, the rare occasions when he smiled, all of it registered somewhere deep in her chest. She told herself it was nothing, just proximity and loneliness. It would pass. 3 weeks after she arrived at the ranch, Aaron came in from the barn one evening and found her kneading bread at the kitchen counter. He watched her work for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. She tensed. "What? Why did you come to Cherry Creek?" It was the question she had been dreading. "I needed a fresh start, running from something or toward something." She kept her eyes on the dough, working it with steady, rhythmic motions. "Does it matter?" "Not to me," he said. "I just want you to know that whatever you are running from, it does not have to follow you here. This can be a safe place if you need it to be." Something in her chest cracked open just a little. She looked up at him, at this man who had given her a job and a place to stay without demanding anything in return, and felt tears prick at her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "I do not need to know your story, Clara. But I want you to know that you are welcome here, for as long as you want to stay." After he left, she stood there with flour on her hands and tears on her cheeks, feeling something shift inside her. Something that felt dangerously like trust. The cattle drive happened in late September. Aaron was gone for nearly 2 weeks, and the ranch felt oddly empty without him. She kept busy with preserving vegetables from the garden, making jam from the wild berries she found growing near the creek, and giving the house a thorough cleaning from top to bottom. When he came back, dusty and exhausted and sporting a new scar on his forearm from a disagreement with a particularly ornery steer, she had a hot meal waiting and a bath drawn. He looked at her with something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "I miss this place," he said. "I missed your cooking." What he did not say, but what hung in the air between them, was that he had missed her too. That night, after dinner, they sat on the porch watching the stars come out. It had become a habit over the past weeks, this quiet time at the end of the day when they would simply exist in each other's company without the need for conversation. "Clara," he said finally, his voice low and careful. "I need to tell you something." She waited, her heart beating faster. "I have grown mighty fond of you these past months. More than fond, if I am being honest. And I know it is probably too soon, and I know you have not told me much about yourself, but I would like to ask you something." She turned to look at him. In the moonlight, his face was all strong lines and shadows. "What?" she asked, though she thought she might already know. "Would you consider marrying me?" The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment. She stared at him, trying to process what he had just asked. "You do not know me," she said finally. "I know enough. I know you are kind and hardworking and honest. I know you make me laugh. I know that this house feels like a home when you are in it. That is enough for me. But you do not even know my real name." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "Then I will never ask. If you marry me, I will never ask your real name. You can be Clara for the rest of our lives, and that will be enough." She felt tears spill over, hot tracks down her cool cheeks. "Why would you offer that?" "Because everyone deserves a chance to start over. Because whatever you are running from, it does not define you. Because I love you, and I do not need to know your past to want to build a future with you." Love. He loved her. She thought about the life she had left behind. The man who had hurt her, the family who had turned their backs, the scandal that would have destroyed her if she had stayed. She thought about the fear that still woke her sometimes in the dead of night, the worry that somehow, someway, it would all catch up to her. Then she looked at Aaron, at this good man who was offering her not just his name but his protection, his respect, and his love, asking nothing in return except that she stay. "Yes," she said, "I will marry you." His face broke into a smile that was pure joy. "Really, really, on one condition." "Anything? You keep your promise. You never ask me my real name." He reached for her hand, his fingers warm and calloused. "I swear it, I will never ask." They were married the following week in a simple ceremony at the small church in Cherry Creek. She wore a blue dress that she had made herself, and he wore his best suit and a tie that he kept fidgeting with. The minister who performed the ceremony wrote her name in the registry as Clara, and she signed it with a steady hand. Mrs. Henderson was there, along with Aaron's 2 ranch hands and a handful of people from town. It was small and quiet and perfect. That night in the bedroom they now shared, Aaron was gentle and patient. He took his time, learning her body with careful hands, murmuring words of love and reassurance. When he finally made her his wife in truth, she felt something inside her unlock, some part of herself she had thought was lost forever. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she felt safer than she had in years. "Aaron," she whispered. Thank you, for what? For giving me this chance, for not asking questions, for loving me anyway." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You do not need to thank me for that. Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done." The years that followed were good ones. They settled into married life with surprising ease, learning each other's rhythms and quirks. She discovered that he sang off-key when he was happy, that he had a sweet tooth he tried to hide, that he was fiercely protective of the people and things he loved. He learned that she was afraid of thunderstorms, that she had a green thumb that could coax life from the most stubborn soil, that she laughed in her sleep sometimes, caught up in dreams she never shared. The ranch prospered. With her help managing the household and the finances, Aaron was able to expand his herd and hire more hands. They built a new barn and renovated the house, adding a proper dining room and a study where Aaron could do his bookwork. In the spring of their 2nd year of marriage, she realized she was pregnant. She told Aaron over breakfast one morning, her hands shaking as she set down his coffee. He looked at her for a long moment, then let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the chickens clear into the next county. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, like he could not quite believe it. "We are going to be parents." Their son was born on a snowy December morning in 1875. He came into the world with a lusty cry and a full head of dark hair, and when the midwife placed him in her arms, she felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "He is perfect," Aaron whispered, his eyes shining with tears. They named him Matthew Aaron Parker, and he became the center of their world. She had never imagined she could love something so fiercely, so completely. Every smile, every milestone, every small triumph filled her with a joy that was almost painful in its intensity. But beneath the happiness, there was always a thread of fear. She would wake sometimes in the night, gripped by the terror that somehow her past would find her, that everything she had built would come crashing down. Aaron never said anything, but she thought he must have known. He would gather her close on those nights, holding her until the fear passed, and she could sleep again. The years rolled on. Matthew grew from a baby to a toddler to a boy who was all skinned knees and endless questions. They had a daughter 2 years later whom they named Sarah, and then another son 3 years after that, whom they called James. The house was full of noise and laughter and the controlled chaos of a growing family. Through it all, Aaron kept his promise. He never asked her real name. He introduced her as his wife, Clara. He called her darling and sweetheart and love, but never questioned the name she had given him. She almost told him several times. The words would be right there on the tip of her tongue, the whole story ready to spill out. But something always held her back. Fear, maybe, or shame, or the superstitious belief that speaking it aloud would give it power, would make it real again. So she kept her secrets, and he kept his promise, and they built a life together on that foundation of unspoken understanding. In the fall of 1883, 10 years after she had stepped off that stagecoach in Cherry Creek, everything changed. She was in the kitchen making apple pie when the stranger arrived. She heard the sound of a horse in the yard, heard Aaron go out to greet whoever it was. She thought nothing of it at first. People were always stopping by the ranch, neighbors and traveling merchants and drifters looking for work. But then she heard voices, tense and sharp, and something in her went cold. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to the window. In the yard, Aaron was talking to a well-dressed man in his 50s, silver-haired and stern-faced. She did not recognize him, but something about the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself, was familiar in a way that made her stomach clench. The man said something, and Aaron's whole body went rigid. He glanced toward the house, his face unreadable from this distance. She knew with a sick certainty that her past had finally caught up to her. The front door opened and Aaron came in alone. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "Who was that?" she asked, though her voice came out barely above a whisper. "He said his name was Charles Lawrence. He is looking for someone." Aaron's eyes met hers, and she saw the question there, the confusion and hurt. "He is looking for his daughter. Her name is Catherine Lawrence." The name hung in the air between them like a physical thing. Catherine, her real name, the one she had not spoken aloud in 10 years. "What did you tell him?" she asked. "I told him I did not know anyone by that name. He showed me a photograph." Aaron pulled a small picture from his pocket, his hand shaking slightly. "It was old, maybe 15 years, but Clara, it looked like you." She closed her eyes. This was it, the moment she had been dreading for a decade. "It is me," she whispered. "My name is Catherine Lawrence. I am his daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. She forced herself to open her eyes to look at her husband, to see the betrayal there. But what she saw was not betrayal. It was shock, yes, and confusion, but underneath it all was something that looked like understanding. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Please, tell me everything." So she did. For the first time in 10 years, she told her story. Her father, Charles Lawrence, was a wealthy businessman in Philadelphia. Her mother had died when she was young, and she had been raised in a world of privilege and expectation. When she was 21, he had arranged a marriage for her to a man named Edmund Burke, the son of his business partner. Edmund had seemed charming at first, attentive and well-spoken and everything a young woman could want. But after the engagement was announced, his true nature began to show. He was possessive and cruel, with a temper that he barely kept in check. She had tried to tell her father, but Charles had dismissed her concerns. The marriage was good for business. It would proceed as planned. 2 weeks before the wedding, Edmund had shown up at the house drunk and angry. He had cornered her in the garden, had grabbed her and hurt her, and made it clear that once they were married, he would do whatever he pleased with her, and no one would stop him. She had fought him off and run. That night, she had packed a bag, taken what money she could find, and left. She had traveled west, changing her name, cutting all ties to her old life. She had known that her father would try to find her, that there would be scandal and shame, but she had been willing to pay that price for her freedom. And then she had met Aaron. And for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she had felt safe. She had built a new life, become a new person. Catherine Lawrence had disappeared, and in her place was Clara Parker, wife and mother and the woman she had always wanted to be. When she finished, there were tears streaming down her face. Aaron had not moved, had not said a word throughout her entire story. Now he stood there, processing everything she had told him. "Your father is outside," he said finally. "Waiting. What do you want to do?" "I do not know. I never thought he would find me." "Do you want to see him?" She thought about it. 10 years ago, she would have said no without hesitation. But now, after all this time, after everything she had built, she found that she did not know. Part of her wanted to rage at him for trying to force her into that marriage, for not protecting her when she needed him most. But another part, the part that remembered being a motherless little girl who had loved her father desperately, wanted to know if he was sorry, if he had changed, if there was any chance of reconciliation. "I think I need to," she said, "but I am scared." Aaron crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "I will be right there with you. Whatever you decide, whatever happens, I am on your side." She held on to him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "You are not angry that I lied to you. You did not lie. You told me your name was Clara, and I accepted that. You never pretended to be anyone you were not with me. And now I know why you needed a new start." He pulled back to look at her. "But Clara, Catherine, whatever name you want to be called, you are my wife. You are the mother of my children. Nothing your father says is going to change that." "Clara," she said firmly. "I want to be Clara. Catherine is someone I used to be, but I am not her anymore." "Then you are Clara," he said simply. They went outside together, hand in hand. Charles Lawrence was still waiting, standing beside his horse with the posture of a man used to getting his way. When he saw her, his face transformed, relief and joy and something that might have been regret all washing over his features. "Catherine," he breathed. "Thank God, I have been searching for years." She stood her ground, Aaron solid and steady beside her. "My name is Clara now, Clara Parker." Her father looked at Aaron, really seeing him for the first time. His expression hardened slightly. "This is the man you chose over the life I gave you, a cowboy." "This is my husband," she said, her voice stronger now. "The father of my children, the man who gave me something you never did." "And what is that, a choice?" Charles flinched as if she had struck him. "Catherine, I came here to bring you home, to make things right. Edmund is married to someone else now. The scandal has died down. You can come back, resume your place in society." "I do not want that life. I never did. I am happy here." "Happy?" He looked around at the ranch, at the simple house and the dusty yard, and she could see the disbelief in his face. "You were raised for better than this." "I was raised to be a decoration, a business arrangement. Here I am a person. I am valued for who I am, not what I can bring to a merger." Aaron's hand tightened on hers, a silent show of support. Charles seemed to deflate slightly. He looked older suddenly and tired. "I failed you. I know that now. When you disappeared, when I realized what Edmund was really like, I understood what I had almost done to you. I have been looking for you ever since, not to drag you back, but to tell you that I am sorry." She had not expected that. "You are sorry." "I put my business ahead of your happiness, ahead of your safety. I was a fool and you paid the price. I just wanted to find you, to apologize, to make sure you were all right." He looked at Aaron again, assessing. "It seems you found someone who values you properly." "I did," she said softly. They stood there in the dusty ranch yard, father and daughter, separated by 10 years and 1,000 miles and choices that could not be unmade. She felt Aaron's presence beside her, felt the weight of her real name settling back onto her shoulders after so long. "I forgive you," she said finally, and meant it. But I am not coming back. This is my home now. This is my family. Charles nodded slowly. I understand, but perhaps I could visit. Get to know my grandchildren. She looked at Aaron, saw the question in his eyes, the silent promise that whatever she decided would be all right with him. Perhaps, she allowed. Someday, when I am ready. Her father's face lit up with fragile hope. That is more than I deserve, thank you. He mounted his horse, then paused and looked down at her. What should I call you, Clara? She said. My name is Clara Parker. He nodded, accepting this. Then goodbye, Clara. I hope to see you again. She watched him ride away, his figure growing smaller against the vast Colorado sky until he disappeared from view. When he was gone, she turned to Aaron, expecting to see questions, demands, heard over the secrets she had kept for so long. Instead, he just smiled at her, that warm, loving smile that had won her heart all those years ago. You all right? He asked. I think so. I never thought I would see him again. Do you regret it? Talking to him, she thought about it. No, I think I needed that closure. To tell him I forgave him, to see that he was sorry. She touched Aaron's face, tracing the familiar lines and planes. But it does not change anything. This is where I belong. He kissed her palm. Good, because I was not planning on letting you go. That evening, after the children were in bed, they sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The stars were coming out, brilliant and countless against the black velvet sky. Aaron, she said. Yes. You said you would never ask my real name, and then today you said it. You called me Catherine. He was quiet for a long moment. I did. I am sorry if I broke my promise. Why did you? After all these years, he turned to face her, his gray eyes serious in the moonlight. Because your father showed up looking for Catherine Lawrence, and I needed to know if that was you. I needed to know if you were safe, if this was someone you wanted to see or someone you needed to be protected from. I broke my promise because I love you and your safety means more to me than any vow. She felt tears prick her eyes. You never asked before. I never needed to before. I told you I would not ask, and I meant it. But when your past showed up at our door, I had to know. I had to make sure you were all right. He reached for her hand. I am sorry if that hurt you. It did not hurt me, she said softly. It made me realize something. What? That you kept your promise for 10 years. 10 years of never asking, never pushing, never demanding to know the secrets I was keeping. You gave me the space to be whoever I needed to be, and you loved me anyway. But when it mattered, when my safety was on the line, you asked. Not because you wanted to invade my privacy, but because you wanted to protect me. I will always protect you, he said, no matter what. She moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. I know, and that is why I love you. That is why I chose you, why I will keep choosing you every day for the rest of my life. They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the night settle over the ranch. In the distance, a coyote howled, lonely and wild. Closer, she could hear the soft lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through the trees. Clara, Aaron said after a while. Yes, can I ask you one more thing? Anything. Do you ever regret it, leaving your old life, giving up your real name? She thought about Philadelphia, about the grand house and the fancy dresses and the suffocating expectations. She thought about Catherine Lawrence, that frightened girl who had run away in the middle of the night. Then she thought about this place, this life. The ranch house with its worn floors and comfortable furniture. The children sleeping upstairs, safe and loved. The man beside her, steady and true in hers. No, she said firmly. I do not regret it for a second. Catherine Lawrence was someone I had to be, but Clara Parker is who I choose to be. And that makes all the difference. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, a promise and a benediction all at once. The next few weeks were strange. She found herself thinking about her father, about the conversation they had had, about the apology she had never expected to receive. Part of her wanted to reach out, to build some kind of relationship with him. But another part was afraid that letting him back into her life would somehow undo all the peace she had found. Aaron, as always, was patient. He did not push, did not demand she make any decisions before she was ready. He just loved her steadily and completely the way he always had. It was Matthew who finally made up her mind. He was 7 now, smart and curious and full of questions about the world. "Mama," he asked one morning over breakfast, "do you have a papa?" The question caught her off guard. "Why do you ask? Tommy at school says everyone has a papa. Even if they die, they still had one, so you must have had one too." She looked at her son, at his innocent face and eager eyes, and felt something shift in her heart. "I do," she said slowly. "He lives far away in Philadelphia." "Why does he not visit?" "Because we had a disagreement a long time ago, before you were born." "What about?" She glanced at Aaron, who was watching her with quiet support. "He wanted me to do something I did not want to do, so I left." Matthew thought about this with the seriousness of childhood. "But he is still your papa." "Yes, he is still my papa." "Then maybe you should forgive him. That is what you always tell us to do when we fight with each other." Out of the mouths of babes. She felt tears sting her eyes at the simple wisdom of it. That night, she sat down and wrote a letter. It was not easy, finding the words to bridge 10 years of silence, but she tried. "Dear Father," she began, and it felt strange to call him that after so long. She told him about the ranch, about Aaron, about the children. She told him about the life she had built and the person she had become. And at the end, she invited him to visit the following spring, to meet his grandchildren and see for himself that she was truly happy. When Aaron posted the letter in town the next day, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Charles Lawrence arrived in April, when the wildflowers were blooming and the world was fresh and green. He came in a hired carriage, looking out of place in his eastern finery against the backdrop of the rough Colorado territory. The children were terrified and fascinated in equal measure. They had never met anyone quite like their grandfather, with his formal manner and expensive clothes. But Charles won them over with stories and small gifts, and a grandfatherly warmth that Catherine had never seen from him before. Over the course of a week, father and daughter began to rebuild their relationship. It was tentative and sometimes awkward, but there was genuine affection there, a desire on both sides to heal the wounds of the past. Aaron watched it all with quiet approval. One evening, while Clara was putting the children to bed and Charles was sitting on the porch smoking a cigar, he joined the older man. "I want to thank you," Charles said without preamble. "For what?" "For taking care of my daughter. For giving her the life I should have given her." Aaron shook his head. "I did not give her anything. She built this life herself. I just had the good sense to ask her to share it with me. Still, she is happy. That is more than I managed in 21 years. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Charles said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "You really never asked her real name, even after you married her." "I did not need to. She told me her name was Clara. That was enough." Charles shook his head in wonder. "That is a rare thing, to love someone without needing to know all their secrets." "I knew everything that mattered. I knew her heart." When Charles left a few days later, it was with promises to return, to write, to be a part of their lives in whatever way Clara was comfortable with. She hugged him goodbye, this man who had once been a source of fear and pain and who was now, tentatively, becoming family again. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for letting me," he replied. "I know I do not deserve it, maybe not, but we all deserve second chances." After he was gone, life settled back into its familiar rhythms. The children grew, the ranch prospered. The years spun out. each one marked by small joys and quiet triumphs. Clara's relationship with her father slowly strengthened. He visited once a year, always in the spring, and they exchanged letters regularly. He never tried to pull her back into his world, seemed content just to be part of hers. When he died in 1891, peacefully in his sleep, she mourned him with a complicated grief that Aaron understood without words. The children grew up strong and happy. Matthew became a fine rancher, eventually taking over more and more of the day-to-day operations as Aaron grew older. Sarah married a teacher from Cherry Creek and settled in town, where she raised 4 daughters of her own. James went to college in Denver and became a lawyer, but he always came home for Christmas. Through it all, through all the changes and challenges and joys, Clara and Aaron remained steadfast. Their love, which had started as a fragile thing built on secrets and unspoken understanding, had grown into something deep and unshakable. On their 20th anniversary, Aaron gave her a gift. It was a simple wooden box carved with her initials. Not CL for Catherine Lawrence, but CP. For Clara Parker. Inside was a piece of paper. On it, in Aaron's careful handwriting, was a single sentence: "I love you, whoever you choose to be." She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "You have always known, have you not, that Catherine was not my birth name?" "I figured it out eventually, but it did not matter. You told me who you were the day we met. Everything else was just details." "Aaron Parker, you are the best man I have ever known." He pulled her close, his arms strong and sure around her. "And you, Clara Parker, are the best thing that ever happened to me." They danced that night in their kitchen, to music only they could hear, moving in the familiar patterns of 2 decades together. Outside, the Colorado sky stretched endless and star-filled. Inside, there was just the 2 of them, the love they had built, and the life they had chosen. The years continued their steady march. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents. The ranch changed and evolved, but the house remained the same, full of memories and love. In the summer of 1905, when Clara was 53 and Aaron 55, they sat on their porch on a warm evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. "You remember the day we met?" Aaron asked. "How could I forget? I was so lost and you were so kind. I knew the moment I saw you that you were going to change my life." She smiled and reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "And I knew that you might be someone I could trust. I was right. I broke my promise, though. I asked your name. You asked when it mattered, when you needed to protect me. That is different. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had not run? If you had married Edmund Burke?" She shuddered. "No, I try not to. That life was never meant for me. This one was." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I am glad you ran. I am glad you ended up in Cherry Creek. I am glad you agreed to marry me with that one condition. Best decision I ever made." They sat in companionable silence as the stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The house behind them was quiet, the children all grown and gone, living their own lives. But it did not feel empty. It felt full, full of all the years they had shared, all the memories they had made. "Clara," Aaron said softly. "Yes, I love you. I love you too." It was a conversation they had had 1,000 times before and would have 1,000 times again. Simple words, but they held the weight of a lifetime. They lived many more good years together. They saw their grandchildren grow up and have children of their own. They celebrated birthdays and anniversaries and all the small moments that make up a life well lived. Aaron passed away in the winter of 1920, peacefully in his sleep with Clara holding his hand. He was 70 years old and had lived a good life, a full life, surrounded by love. At his funeral, Clara stood beside the grave and thought about the promise he had made all those years ago. To never ask her real name. To love her regardless of who she had been or what she was running from. He had kept that promise for 10 years, and then he had broken it to keep her safe. And then he had spent the next 40 years proving every single day that the name did not matter, that she was simply and completely his beloved wife. She lived another 12 years after Aaron died, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She spent her days tending her garden, writing letters, and telling stories about the man she had loved and the life they had built together. When she died in the spring of 1932, at the age of 80, she was laid to rest beside Aaron in the small cemetery outside Cherry Creek. Her headstone reads simply, Clara Parker, beloved wife and mother, but in the box of personal effects she left to Matthew, there was a letter. In it, she had written out her whole story, the truth of who she had been and why she had run, and how she had found her way to Cherry Creek all those years ago. She told him about Catherine Lawrence and Edmund Burke and the life she had escaped. She told him about meeting his father, about the promise Aaron had made, about the moment he had broken it and why, and at the end she wrote, I have been called many names in my life. Catherine, Clara, wife, mother, grandmother. But the only name that ever mattered was the one your father gave me with his love. I am his and he is mine, and that is the only truth that counts. Let this story be a reminder that we are not bound by our pasts, that we can choose who we want to be, and that real love sees the heart, not the history. Matthew read the letter with tears streaming down his face, understanding for the first time the full weight of what his parents had built together. He shared it with his siblings, and they wept together for the parents they had loved, and the incredible gift they had been given in their example. The ranch continued on, passed down through generations of Parkers, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But in the family Bible, carefully preserved, was the record of Aaron and Clara's marriage, and next to Clara's name in faded ink, someone had added a note, born Catherine Lawrence. Died Clara Parker. Loved completely. In the end, that was all that mattered. Not the name she had been born with or the one she had chosen or the secrets she had kept. What mattered was the love she had found, the family she had built, and the life she had lived on her own terms. She had agreed to marry the cowboy if he never asked her real name. He had kept that promise for 10 years and then broken it for the right reasons. And together, they had proved that love is not about knowing everything. It is about trusting enough to build something beautiful anyway. Their story became a legend in Cherry Creek, passed down through generations. The woman who came to town with nothing but a carpetbag and secrets, and the cowboy who loved her without needing to know where she came from. It was a story about second chances and new beginnings, about the courage to run and the wisdom to stop running when you find the place you are meant to be. And in the small house on the ranch outside town, in the room that had once been Clara's before it became theirs together, there was still a wooden box with the initials CP carved on the lid. Inside, wrapped in yellowed paper, was a simple note in Aaron's handwriting. I love you, whoever you choose to be. It was a promise kept and a promise broken and a promise that, in the end, did not need words at all. Because real love, the kind that lasts beyond names and years and even death itself, is written not in vows but in actions, in showing up every day, in choosing each other again and again, regardless of the past. Clara had run from one life and found another. She had traded Catherine for Clara, Philadelphia for Colorado, fear for love. And in doing so, she had discovered a truth that would echo through the generations of her family, that we are not defined by the names we are given or the circumstances we are born into, but by the choices we make and the love we cultivate. She had chosen Aaron, and he had chosen her, and together they had built something that would outlast them both. A legacy of love, of trust, of understanding that sometimes the most important questions are the ones we choose not to ask. The mountains still stand watch over Cherry Creek, purple and eternal against the Colorado sky. The ranch still operates, now run by Clara and Aaron's great-great-grandchildren. The house has been updated and modernized, but the bones are the same, the foundation as solid as ever. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispers through the pines and the stars come out one by one, it almost seems like you can feel them there still. The woman who came from nowhere and the man who loved her anyway. Not ghosts exactly, but presences. A reminder that true love is patient and kind and asks no more than what can be freely given. They had started with a bargain, marriage in exchange for silence. But what they built was so much more than that. It was a partnership, a friendship, a love story for the ages. It was proof that sometimes the best way to know someone is not to demand their secrets, but to love them well enough that they want to share them. And in the end, when all the years had passed and all the stories had been told, what remained was simple and true. She had been Catherine. She became Clara. But most of all, she was loved, completely, unconditionally, forever. That was the legacy they left behind. Not wealth or fame, but the knowledge that it is possible to start over, to choose your own name, to write your own story. And that the greatest gift you can give someone is the freedom to be exactly who they need to be, the cowboy and the woman with secrets. It sounds like the beginning of a legend, and in Cherry Creek, that is exactly what it became. But for Aaron and Clara Parker, it was simply life, their life. Chosen, cherished, and lived fully to the very last day.